long-awaited decision on interest rates was announced last Thursday, with the Reserve Bank's Monetary Policy Committee seeing inflation well contained, at least for the first half of 2025.
The MPC decided to reduce the policy rate by 25 basis points with effect from the 31st of January 2025. 4 members preferred this action, while 2 supported an unchanged stance. The committee ultimately agreed that it was possible to reduce the degree of policy restrictiveness, making the stance somewhat more neutral. However, all members were concerned about the uncertain global outlook.
At the same time, the MPC was announcing its decision on interest rates. Energy regulator NERSA announced that it had approved electricity tariff adjustments for Eskom for the next 3 years. The first year, financial year 2025-26, was the highest figure, with electricity tariff set to rise by 12.7%. Eskom had originally asked for 36%. Questions around the sustainability of these continued annual hikes remain.
All these items just keep adding up. So from a consumer perspective, again, 12% is a lot of money on an absolute necessity. And we have to also then ask the question, there's a reason why NERSA asked, or why they've asked for this specific percentage. What happens in the event that they're not getting it now? What does that mean for our infrastructure and the future of, possibly looking at load shedding again, which again puts, businesses under pressure, it puts consumers under pressure, and job stability and, work and unemployment. So there's a lot of factors we have to look at on the ripple effect on what this means. But, thank goodness, agreed, definitely happier with that than a 36%.
Earlier in the week, Stats SA released its much-anticipated income and expenditure survey. It showed that national average incomes had risen substantially, from around 75,000 rand in 2006 to over 204,000 rand by 2023. It also noted that Gauteng and the Western Cape's average incomes were higher than the national average, and that income inequalities in terms of race had persisted over time.
You can see that the incomes of black South Africans are the lowest, lower than the national average. And indeed, when you look at the expenditure, you find that there's a very little gap that is left between income and expenditure, meaning that they have very little disposable income compared to the other population groups, particularly compared to the white population group, which has higher income and indeed higher expenditure levels, but with a wider gap, meaning that they have enough disposable income.
The International Monetary Fund also released its Article 4 consultation report on South Africa, stemming from a process where it engages government, the private sector and other role players in the economy to make an assessment of how the economy is faring. It pegged GDP growth of 1.5% for 2025 on the back of investor and consumer confidence post the elections, with an economic growth expectation of 1.8% by the end of the decade. And it saw government or fiscal deficits moderating over time. At a micro level, the High Court in Pretoria reserved judgment in an urgent case brought by suspended Exarro CEO Nombasa Tsengwa. She'd approached the court on urgency, arguing that the suspension from her employer 2 months prior had unfairly prejudiced her.
It affects the dignity of a person, a constitutionally protected right. It also affects the commercial interests of the CEO. Why? Because the CEO is the person, and once we show that we will be in the fullness, in whom the strategic and tactical decision-making of the company resides. The CEO is not the underling of the board. The CEO does a professional job from where the powers come directly from the Constitution through the MOI to the CEO.
And just when we thought the week couldn't get any more eventful, we got word from Eskom on Friday that load shedding this weekend was a real prospect, with stage 3 load shedding effected at 5 p.m. on the day. This, as the power utility indicated it had been battling with power station breakdowns in the past week that would require extended repair times and that their backup reserves needed time to be replenished. Nompumelo Siziba, SABC News, Johannesburg.